This is My Child Will Thrive, and I'm your host, Tara Hunkin, nutritional therapy practitioner, certified GAPS practitioner, restorative wellness practitioner, and mother. I'm thrilled to share with you the latest information, tips, resources, and tools to help you on the path to recovery for your child with ADHD, autism, sensory processing disorder, or learning disabilities. My own experiences with my daughter, combined with as much training as I can get my hands on, research I can dig into, and conferences I can attend, have helped me to develop systems and tools for parents like you who feel overwhelmed trying to help their children. So sit back as I share another great topic to help you on your journey. It's episode 3 of the My Child Will Thrive podcast, and here's what's coming up. It takes that foundation of the SCD diet of removing disaccharides and adding fermented products, but a quick disclaimer before we get started. My Child Will Thrive is not a substitute for working with a qualified healthcare practitioner. The information provided on this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat your child. Please consult your healthcare practitioner before implementing any information or treatments that you have learned about on this podcast. There are many gifted, passionate, and knowledgeable practitioners with hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of study and clinical experience available to help guide you. Part of our goal is to give you the knowledge and tools you need to effectively advocate for your child so that you don't blindly implement each new treatment that comes along. No one knows your child better than you. No one knows your child's history like you do or can better judge what is normal or abnormal for your child. The greatest success in recovery comes from the parent being informed and asking the right questions and making the best decisions for their child in coordination with a team of qualified practitioners in different areas of specialty. Now on with the show. Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about a topic that comes up a lot. People often ask me what's the difference between the GAPS diet and the SCD diet, or the gut and psychology syndrome diet and the specific carbohydrate diet, and how to choose between the two when you're deciding on a therapeutic diet for your child. The reason for this, of course, is because GAPS and SCD are based on some of the same principles. But understanding the differences between the two make it easier to implement them successfully and also to decide between the two. Let's just start by talking about what is the SCD, or a specific carbohydrate diet. It's a diet that was originated in the 1950s by Dr. Sidney Haas and was popularized by the book Breaking the Vicious Cycle, Intestinal Health Through Diet, that was written by a mother of a patient of Dr. Haas, Elaine Gottschall, after his death. She wanted to make sure that his work continued on because it was so successful for her child. She continued on to do a lot of research in this particular area and eventually wrote the book and established a website in order to continue on the work. So SCD diet in particular actually was one that was recommended for many, many years for celiac patients because of its success with that. And the SCD does eliminate gluten along with other grains or all disaccharides, just like the GAPS diet. Interestingly, the SCD diet is even more effective than just eliminating gluten from the diet for celiac patients. That's just a bit of an aside. The two main premises of the SCD diet are focusing on eliminating disaccharides, and by doing this, it is eliminating the food for the bad bacteria that have accumulated in the gut of a patient that requires this type of treatment. And the disaccharides are more complex carbohydrates, so it's your starches and your sugars, or some of your sugars. And what it does is digestion isn't working really well and they aren't broken down properly. By the time they reach the gut, they feed the bad bacteria. So by eliminating those while you're rebalancing the gut, you aren't continuing to feed and propagate the pathogenic bacteria in the gut. The second premise is then repopulating the gut with good bacteria, and the SCD diet does this primarily through long fermented yogurt. And so it's a 24-hour ferment that is used to, again, add good bacteria back to the gut so it can heal over time. So those are the two main premises behind the SCD diet. So what about the GAPS diet? So the gut and psychology syndrome diet that was developed by Natasha Campbell McBride, who's a medical doctor and a neurologist, and then went back to get a master's in nutrition when her son suffered from autism, and she didn't find any treatments that she felt were going to really effectively help him. So she looked to nutrition, and through her research, she discovered the SCD diet and then has built on top of that diet to create a full and complete protocol which she feels addresses all the issues associated with a person that has digestive issues and gut imbalances, which then are affecting creating neurological symptoms in different ways for different people. So the GAPS diet takes that foundation of the SCD diet of removing disaccharides and adding fermented products, but it expands further on that. So let's go into what those additional aspects are. So what I would say is the biggest difference between the two diets are the addition of healing foods. So it's not just focusing on what we're removing from the diet and just adding yogurt, but it also is adding a lot more different healing foods that can support the healing process of the gut along the way. In particular, there's an overall emphasis of adding nutrient-dense foods and the quality of your food sources. So looking for meats that have been pasture-raised and grass-fed for cows and free-range or pasture-fed chickens. And also looking to add foods that are sulfur-based, which both support the methylation and sulfation cycles, but also a number of those sulfur-based foods like garlic and onions. Also, garlic in particular happens to be an antimicrobial as well. So again, along those lines, the diet talks a lot about adding foods like that are antimicrobial and antifungal, so that you're using food to combat the pathogenic bacteria in the gut. So not having to rely on supplements or pharmaceuticals to do that. Although in the book, Dr. Natasha does talk about the use of some pharmaceuticals in particular to combat yeast, ones that don't impact the liver, like nystatin. The other thing that's a foundation of the GAPS diet is meat stock and bone broth. So meat stock is where the bones with some meat on it are cooked for a shorter period of time, and that's better tolerated for someone who is just starting on the diet and has a lot of inflammation and aren't able to tolerate the 24-hour or longer cooked bone broths. And so she talks a lot about that in the book itself. And then in addition to yogurt, which is there is a protocol for introducing dairy into the diet, but if dairy isn't something someone can tolerate, then there is a big emphasis on fermented vegetables and other foods as well. So you're going to get a greater variety of both food that is nutrient dense and is also probiotic in nature by fermenting different vegetables. In particular, one is cabbage is one of the first ones, so making a sauerkraut that's long fermented and just using the juice from that before someone can actually tolerate digesting the cabbage itself. On top of that, cabbage juice in particular has vitamins that help heal the gastric lining. So most of the foods that are included in it have multi-purposes, and that's why many people find who can implement GAPS appropriately that it is very effective. Another thing that Dr. Natasha includes in her protocol is the juicing. So she has created this thing called the GAPS milkshake, and it uses a combination of fruits and vegetables. Obviously, she likes to rely more heavily on the vegetables, being beets and carrots, in particular because they help with detox, and in particular the beets help with bile flow. and adds into that some healthy fats to stimulate the gallbladder as well to excrete the bile. The other things that Dr. Natasha includes in the GAPS protocol are supplemental things like Epsom salt baths, which both will help with magnesium. Magnesium is best absorbed through the skin, and also from a sulfation standpoint, it's going to support those methylation cycles. The other item that she includes is iodine painting. So instead of supplementing orally with iodine, using a iodine tincture and just painting a patch on the skin and letting it absorb through the skin naturally, and that discusses that further in the book. And then the other thing it emphasizes in the book is removing as many as the toxicants that are in the environment around you and your child, so that you aren't overloading the system inadvertently by using certain health and beauty products or cleaning products in the home, or it could be a mold issue in the house. So those are things are layered on top of the basis of the SCD diet. The other difference is with the SCD and the GAPS diet is the GAPS diet has a much more extensive introduction protocol. SCD also has an intro diet as well, but it isn't staged the way the GAPS diet is. The GAPS diet has a 6-stage introduction diet. Now, that's not appropriate for everyone, and you don't have to start there. Some people go to the full GAPS diet and start there and then go back to the introduction. In particular, the introductory stage of the GAPS diet is not appropriate for anybody that suffers from constipation, as it removes a lot of the fiber out of the diet temporarily to allow for the digestive tract to have a break and promote healing. So full GAPS would be the place to start if you have a child that suffers from constipation. So once you understand all those things, the question is, how do you choose between the two different protocols? Where do you start and how do you choose? So my first suggestion is to read the books. And the reason for this is understanding the why behind all the different components, especially the ones that Dr. Natasha layers on in the GAPS diet, will help you decide what makes sense for your child based on you understanding their full picture. And then you have to decide what's your family ready to do. These are big changes. They're big lifestyle changes, depending on where you're at in terms of what you're eating and your child's eating. And you have to figure out what will work for you and your family. Because when you go to implement these diets, you have to be all in. You got to decide you're going to do it and jump in with both feet. And there are tough patches for sure, and sticking them out is very difficult if you haven't made the full commitment to do it, or you have any doubts or challenges. The other question is how severe your child's digestive symptoms. So somebody might want to start with SCD because it doesn't encompass as many changes because they don't feel that their child has as many digestive symptoms. Keep in mind that sometimes they're very subtle, and it may be a better place for you to start, and then you can ease into the GAPS diet if that's where you want to go to. The other question is, how strong are your child's cravings for carbs and starchy foods? If you have a kid who is that's really all they're interested in eating is sweets and starches, you are most likely looking at a child that has a significant case of dysbiosis of some kind. It could be yeast, it could be other types of pathogenic bacteria that are basically demanding the kid to eat starches to feed that bad bacteria. They actually crave them because the bacteria, the microbiome is asking for them. And unfortunately, that is one of the biggest challenges of implementing these diets, is moving away from the starchy carbs, the disaccharides, and into the monosaccharides. And then really the last thing I would say is that you have to figure out, everybody has their own approach to these types of things. Are you like the type of person that would prefer, and you think your child would do better if you ease into things over time? Or are you both feed in all at once kind of person? I am that kind of person, so I chose the GAPS diet, and that worked really well for my family, but that doesn't suit everybody and everybody's circumstances. So you have to decide what you can tolerate doing, because the implementation of these diets is very challenging, but very rewarding. So I don't want to discourage anyone from taking this on. Just preparation is key for success. Just to wrap up what we've talked about today, both diets have been shown to be very effective in resolving symptoms and rebalancing the gut flora and healing the gut, which in turn heals a number of symptoms that are neurological based as well because of the gut-brain axis. Both GAPS and SCD remove harder to digest disaccharides out of the diet to starve out the pathogenic bacteria and give the digestive system a rest. GAPS, in addition to removing certain foods, focuses on adding healing foods and other supportive protocols. And that is one of the key success factors to GAPS, is not to focus on what you're taking away, but really focus on what you're adding in. If you add in those healing foods and other supportive protocols, it is much more effective. Reading the books for both approaches is the best way to figure out what's right for your child. So really digging in, understanding what they all mean, and understanding that why behind each of the things they are asking you to do will allow you and your practitioner to tailor it specifically to your child, because every kid is different. And like I said before, many parents choose to start with SCD and ease into the GAPS protocol once they're ready. So sometimes if you just take on the eliminating parts of the diet, being the biggest changes being eliminating all the disaccharides or the starchy foods right off the bat, and then easing into all the additional things that GAPS may layer on top of that, that might work better for you and your family. In order to compare this to other diets, I have an earlier blog post that I talked about the top 10 therapeutic diets, and with that, and with this podcast, I also have a top 10 therapeutic diet cheat sheet, and that just summarizes the key pros and cons and benefit and drawbacks of each of these two diets and others that you may choose along your way. And you can find that over at mychildwillthrive.com/podcast/003. And you'll see a button to click to download the top 10 therapeutic diets cheat sheet. It's been great to have you here today. I look forward to seeing you again soon. And if you like this, I'd really appreciate if you would go ahead and leave me a review on iTunes and let me know what your thoughts and feelings are on the podcast so far. And also let me know in the comments or over in the My Child Will Thrive Village Facebook group what you thought of this podcast and whether or not it helped you in choosing between the SCD diet and the GAPS diet. So that's a wrap. Thanks for joining me this week on My Child Will Thrive. I'm so passionate about giving you the tools and information you need to help your child recover. And as they say, it takes a village, so join us in the My Child Will Thrive Village Facebook group, where you can meet like-minded parents and stay up to date on everything we have going on at My Child Will Thrive. This is Tara Hunkin, and I'll catch you on the next podcast or over at mychildwillthrive.com.